All right, everybody, welcome back to the Design, Build, Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. Today, we are talking farm country whitetail habitat design. Sam, thanks for hopping on the show with me today.
Hey, good to be here, Josh. We're excited getting in here to consulting season.
Yeah, we're getting very, very close. The rut is winding down, at least maybe some of the earlier chaos and the frenzy that we are looking forward to every year. And it seems like around this time is when folks start to think, hey, maybe there were some deficiencies in my property. Maybe my hunting didn't match my expectations. Maybe some of the things I've tried on my own didn't quite pan out how I thought they might. Let's take a look around and see what some of these consultants have to offer. And so we're at that time when people are thinking about consulting season, thinking about what we might be able to help them with on their property. So we're going to do a little bit of a mini series here. We're going to fire off some quick hitters of some properties like this one right here that are representative of an area. They're not necessarily the one in the area that gets all the bells and whistles of, but these are good representatives of these terrain and habitat types. And today we're going to focus on a property there in farm country. So why don't you tell me a little bit about this piece, kind of generally where it's at and what are we dealing with here?
Yeah, well, thanks for teeing that up. We're in south central Wisconsin here, and basically there's not a lot of terrain. We get into western Wisconsin, we have a lot more topography and all that, but what we would call a farm country tract. So there's large swaths of tillable as you see me scrolling in and out on this thing. And for those just listening in, we're talking relatively flat ground. The only places that we have these woodlots are going to be isolated or localized areas of topography. In this case, and I have the topo layer turned off just so you can see the drawing a little more clearly. But, this woodlot has a very gentle hill to it. There's enough of a slope in here that they didn't clear it out and turn it into tillable ground like everything else around it. And it's really not interconnected to other timber. So that's, I think, a key highlight of a lot of things in farm country is we get called out to these parcels where they are not very well connected. The cover is not connected from one area to another. And a lot of times on a farm, we'll end up focusing on maybe it's one or two woodlots or several isolated woodlots. So this is the farm country episode, as we're saying, as far as how these designs work. This one has some unique features to it that we can get into in terms of access and, some already existing habitat work that the landowner's been doing and how, we're customizing this for who this landowner is.
Right. Absolutely. And hey, this is in south central Wisconsin. But hey, wherever you are in farm country, if you're in, Illinois, if you're in South Georgia, if you're in Southeast Alabama, if you're in Minnesota, there's a lot of places that this is very relevant. Let's kick it off and discuss the challenges, though, specifically associated with farm country. You mentioned one there. It's the connectivity issue. But just run me through some of the challenges that you knew, given this piece, we've got to deal with this or we are going to struggle.
Right. So, first off, the guy is a farmer and he has a lot of these adjacent tillable acres, and he's not looking to take back 40, 60, 80, 100 acres and turn it into open field development and habitat. We do have those type of clients that want to take large swaths of land and do this open field development. But he basically said, no, I'm only really interested in taking some, 5 to 10 acre areas here on the adjacent parts of this woodlot to basically develop his whitetail hunting property. And, so working with available acres, that's an early qualifier we talk about in a client interview is, hey, what space do we have to work with on your property? And then looking at it in this situation, because we were more confined to this area, we're not necessarily trying to develop that interconnected cover. I mentioned that before as a challenge. Sometimes in these farm country properties, we're going to start to develop strips. Maybe it's a fence row, like I'll just point to this one over here as an example, say like, hey, even though that doesn't look like much, there's something we might be able to do to make that more of a predominant corridor and travel route for deer. But in this case, we were really kind of working more in a bubble, saying, hey, we wanted to keep the deer here. If our objective in this, I don't know, 10 to 15 acre woodlot is to say we want to try and hold deer within this area. Now at night, they're going to be a mile in every direction. They're going to go out and do whatever they do. But during the day, we want to make a safe place that they can come. And we're probably talking mostly early morning or late night hunts, or late evening hunts, and focusing more on those for this property. And also some of the specifics. I mentioned this with the landowner, a more elderly gentleman, a little bit of access concern, and also wanting convenience, more hunting blinds, less tree stands, that sort of thing. So as we get into this, we'll see that we're looking mostly at blinds here. There's not as many tree stand setups, which if you're more of that, we'll say, young, agile bow hunter, and you're looking to hunt a certain way, you're going to have a different set of criteria than we were looking at for this design for this gentleman.
Right. And so may look very, very different. I know you've also got your bedding layer turned off here, but that core integrity is going to be extremely important for this individual, especially, when it comes, let's say, some of our favorite times, right? Pre-rut and rut. We don't have those long strips of cover coming in and connecting. So are we thinking more of an early season, late season kind of play on this property, or what are we laying it out for?
Yeah, so I think there's ample opportunity for all seasons here for sure, different types of hunt. But I think developing those summer patterns, you could really have some high success here, I think, in those early summer or early fall, late summer patterns. And then also getting into more of that late season where you're dependent on food sources. They're going to be more regulated in their bedding locations and things like that. Now, of course, the pre-rut and rut, because you're going to house does here too, you're going to have ample opportunity for all those bucks. But I do think, my mindset goes to more food-based hunts and more of that bedding to food movement, which typically we're going to characterize with early and late in the season.
Right. So given this client's, priorities of, simpler access, we need to be, have blinds and that kind of thing. How did that impact the hunting strategy and some of the setups that you've got here on the property?
Sure. And I think it's a great point to bring up in this situation to say on small woodlots in farm country, we need to be ultra concerned about how far into them we're impacting our access, where we're setting up for our stand locations, and just exactly how we're approaching these hunts. Otherwise, we're really going to blow out the deer and screw it up. And I think that, within that, what we got to look at is say, hey, one, we mentioned the gentleman's concern for access and ease of entry and those sort of things. You'll notice most of this, so this white line on the perimeter, this basically we're saying that is your ATV, UTV trail. You can go around that thing and get to these locations as you need to, and then you walk in on these red hunter access. So I'll just focus in on this plot here. And so he had existing, and you'll see some of this tree plantings, which we're going to utilize because you're increasing the quality of the cover around it. But we want to make a strong pass through here, a perpendicular access point, so he can park right outside on his field here. And maybe, he's coming later in the fall, he can drive right across his corn, park 100 yards away, and maybe walk in, such that he's not as intrusive with sound. But, he's able to access this blind, hunt this, call it 1 acre plot here with lots of movement coming to and from it. And that's a really super easy access for him.
Right. Absolutely. What are some of the food sources that you were focusing on with this property? I mean, I see, some pretty, let's say, sophisticated food plot architecture here, obviously setting this gentleman up for a great archery opportunity. What are some of the food sources that you're staggering in here, especially considering that, hey, this is farm country, crops come out and there is nothing left. There's no food around. Right.
Yeah. And a great point. There is food and forage still, obviously within the timber, the browse into late season. But once we're getting to, later part of the season, the crops are gone, the browse is less in the timber, really keying in on these food sources. So you mentioned it before with the architecture, he had a lot of interest and pride still wanting to do bow hunting and give himself opportunity. Ties in with my comments earlier about that late summer pattern. But you'll see like this dark green, for example, we're going to develop a clover or clover chicory blend. We like to use that from John Comp and his company, Northwoods Whitetails. And having these bowed out movements, what we're going to call a travel plot. So we focused on having these travel plot opportunities where they're going to be pass-throughs. Deer aren't going to be in them for a long time, but they're going to use them for their, season-long travel pattern. I have these on my property. They work awesome where I have a large 6-acre open field, but between switchgrass, these travel plots, standing corn, you really still have a lot of structure around, and that allows you to get in there, to be in there and have deer feel comfortable and natural moving throughout what would be a much larger area because it's more compartmentalized and there's flow to it. You'll notice there's not a lot of straight lines here. And if you have corn, let's say this darker yellow area here, if you have standing corn here, a deer that comes out into this plot, they're going to go around that to see what's on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it was just beans or maybe the whole thing was clover, they can see from the timber's edge the whole thing. And what we're trying to do is break that up, whether that's through perennial plantings with switchgrass, like the tan plantings we have here, the tan shading, or through an annual, either a screen or a food product, corn, that we would utilize that. And I love to see corn set up in these situations, and you think a guy might think, well, how do you plant this? Or, you could plant this whole thing in one big box with a planter and then go in there once it starts growing with a mower or a disc and really make the shape you want it to be.
Right. And you really, and while it may pain you a little bit to go in and mow some of that corn or whatever while it's still growing, the cost impact is really negligible.
It's nothing. Yeah. If we look at what we spend on deer properties, tilling up a 1/4 acre of corn to make your travel plot through it, that's really no big deal. And that's the easy and right way to do it, I think.
That's right. And it saves you time, honestly, when you're putting the corn in, rather than trying, well, let me try to, not plant this section, but plant this section. You're just better off. Take the machine through, plant the corn, come in, mow it down, plant inside.
Well, we get some good machine therapy that way too, Josh. We gotta get some out. You gotta get some hours on the machine and make sure you're enjoying it. So it's all part of it.
That's right. Hey, despite the challenges associated with tighter cover in farm country, having to be really, really careful with how we treat this timber, I still see some really high quality timber hunts that you have him set up for here.
Yeah.
Can you run me through maybe your favorite one or dive into a couple?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So he had this existing blind here that he didn't want to move. So we tried to preserve a movement there. But one of the things I key on immediately is roadside access. Some people look at a parcel and say, I want to be I want the farthest back 40 I can find, right? I want to be way off the road and this and that. And I look at it and say, did you know that deer are going to parallel this road because they don't want to cross it? And you can come in 20, 30 yards off a road, hop into a tree stand, and the deer don't even know that you entered the property, especially if there's bedding within the core, because usually you may not have bedding and you might keep this the perimeter, call it this 20, 30 yards adjacent to the road, that might be fairly open. You don't necessarily want to encourage bedding right there. Whereas inside and again, I have the bedding layer off because it just makes this thing pretty cumbersome with the topography. But, if you've got bedding within the system, within this lot, and then you come out here and you're in a tree stand, if you have a south wind here, you've got this whole thing to your advantage. And in a south wind, a deer is going to move east-west on a strong corridor, especially if there's, food on both sides, there's mock scrapes and water holes along the way. That's a very strong opportunity for deer to move there, still feel comfortable within the timber. And, those roadside access stands, whether it's a blind or a stand, either one can be quite good. Here's a simple example. I think this is something we key on all the time. A few things going on here. Number one, you got a house right across the road. So human noise, smells, those sort of things, pretty normal, right? They're going to think anything from this farm operation that those are going to be smells and noises they're used to. Also, we have a food source here to the east. If let's say there's an east or southeast wind, that's really favorable for deer coming out of the timber, using this trail to get to the food plot. mock scrape, water hole, and that roadside entry. This is a deadly setup. I love this thing. And guess what? If we got the opposite wind, we got it down here too. And, in some of these younger pine plantings, real strong natural bedding. Again, the bedding layer is off, so we don't talk about that as much now, but really strong bedding throughout that whole area that could be utilized.
Right. And as we're thinking about getting into that, pre-rut and rut time frame, you've got him several setups between, strong bedding on the west and strong bedding on the east. So he's got some great, bedding to bedding kind of movement mid-morning, 9:30, 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, getting cruising bucks traveling through a strong corridor there.
Yeah, and talk about those repeatable hunts. I emphasized this before, not just diving into the main bedding areas and everything else where your wind, no matter which direction you have it, you're going to blow this place out. I think if you're on these edges, these are very repeatable hunts and something you can take advantage of. We have another example down here in this corner. You have kind of this inside corner of movement, and deer, we have, although we show this corridor here, which was really strong. I mean, and there was kind of some topography here that this was almost like a bench they were working across. But having mock scrape, water hole in between food, cover around it, and any sort of north component or east component to the wind, you're in great shape here. I mean, this southwest corner is a real deadly spot too. So every corner here, you're going to look at it and say, oh yeah, that's a great spot to be, given that wind component that we were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about two things. I want to know, when you go to these farm country pieces, what are some of the maybe mistakes in hunting that you're noticing that are patterns that you notice across them? And then what's a key takeaway that if you've got a farm country piece, like this is something you really need to pay attention to?
So a couple things. Number one, I've mentioned wind a few times. Hill country, that can be extremely complex. Whereas in farm country where there's less topography, it's a lot more predictable. So I enjoy the fact here where we have less topography that we have more predictable winds, and we can make these setups that we're more easily able to explain when to hunt them. I think one of the common mistakes that we see within these farm country parcels, though, and especially these small woodlots, is that stand location that's within the interior, staying to the exterior, staying to places that are easy to get in and out of, take advantage of those winds or even slightly marginal winds, is how these setups are successful. There are successful hunters that kill big bucks on 1, 2, 3, 10-acre woodlots every year, and they understand this. They know when to go in there. They know their entry exit points. In fact, they might even have such great camera locations that they're knowing where the deer are coming back into these woodlots, and they know when they're in, when they're out, and they're really on top of their deer. And more, you have the opportunity here to more micromanage these situations where you have these smaller woodlots.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. All right. One key takeaway, a guy's sitting in farm country right now and he's thinking, man, I need to do some things different. What would be the one thing that you'd say, hey, this will change your hunting in farm country if you'll do it?
Okay, well, we've been driving on cover, and I'll just zoom out and say that you need to understand that your most limited resource is cover.
Mm-hmm.
And if you understand where your cover is strongest and also the connection points to other areas of cover, we haven't talked much about this in this episode because we didn't utilize much for fence rows and things like that, but there are highly successful hunters that understand where their areas of cover are, and that's not just timber, that might be other types, where those are, how the deer are utilizing them, and how they get from one to the next. And a lot of times, like I mentioned, big bucks are killed on those fence lines, especially in the rut when they're taking that risk to travel down that fence row. That is some very successful hunting technique to be along those edges, particularly if you do some habitat development, whether it's some adjacent buffer with warm season grass plantings or even some hinge cutting along those edges. You can make those corridors very strong along your fence rows.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, Sam, thanks for coming on the show today. I appreciate it, folks. If you want to learn more, head over to our website, whitetailpartners.com. You can find us on YouTube and all sorts of other places. But Sam, thanks for joining me today.
Great. Thanks, Josh.